Pakistan's descent into madness, blasphemy allegation leads to brutal lynching. Oh my gosh. So there was another very, very extreme, very public lynching, blasphemy lynching in Pakistan recently, and the details are crazy. Okay. In a shocking display of religious extremism, a Muslim mob in Pakistan's Swat Valley stormed a police station, seized a man accused of blasphemy, and lynched him. The victim, Mohammad Ismail, a tourist visiting for Eid Al-Adha when he was accused of desecrating a Quran. The incident escalated rapidly after a mosque loudspeakers called for locals to gather, leading to the violent attack. As regional police officer Mohammad Ali Gandapur described, quote, after initially rescuing the man from a mob, the police took him to a station in Madyan. But announcements from mosque loudspeakers asked the locals to come out. The mob's actions, which included burning the police station and the victim's body, have sparked outrage and renewed concerns about Pakistan's blasphemy laws and the prevalence of religiously motivated violence in the country. Authorities have launched an investigation to identify and arrest those responsible for this horrific act. Okay, so let's give a little more detail. And I'm glad that Young Atheist isn't in the chat today because he's in Pakistan and perhaps has more insight into details that are not available in English speaking media, right? So there was a man, and I can't remember what region of Pakistan he was from, but he was on some domestic tourism, right? And so he was visiting this region known as Swat, and it's not really clear what happened based on the reports that I have read. But at some point, he's accused of desecrating the Quran, and all hell breaks loose. Like, I really sometimes we get a little bit more insight into, like, what was behind the allegation or the accusation. Maybe there was a WhatsApp message or something. With this, I really don't have a clue. But for whatever reason, he was accused of desecrating a Quran. So, a mob gets incited against him. Yeah, Young Atheist is saying that he was from Punjab. Thank you. That's what I thought, but I wasn't sure. Possibly Lahore. And so this tourist begins getting attacked by a mob. Somehow or another, the police rescue him and they take him into custody and they go bring him to the police station. Well, a lynch mob gets incited because the loudspeakers of the mosques start announcing what happened. They start announcing what happened and ask the locals to come out. Basically, the announcements from the mosques start inciting a lynch mob. And this lynch mob goes and attacks the police station. They set the police station on fire. Several officers were injured. That was my understanding. I believe the police station is basically destroyed. I'm not completely sure. And they get their hands on this man. And this man is then beaten to death and his body set on fire. Again, this guy's just like a random tourist on holiday for Eid. This is how his Eid holiday ended. And the videos of this lynching are all over social media. It's not hard to find, and it is brutal. Uh, I, it's actually really bad that I make myself go watch these videos. It's horrible. It's really, really horrible. Like, it's really crazy and bizarre to see like a mob of like hundreds of men, all of them with their phones out, and they're all filming themselves like as they're um spraying more gasoline on his body, stomping on his body, like his arms are still moving while he's on fire. It's horrific. Like really, 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 really horrific. Yeah, Kenny's saying, I'm not sure I want to see this. You don't want to see it. You don't need to. And so my understanding is that, the authorities are investigating and that some people have already been arrested for their involvement in this, yada, yada, yada. And oh, this is an interesting comment from Gene, saying this is horrific beyond words. Knowing shit like this happens makes me less shocked by October 7th. I understand the sentiment. The kind of motivation behind these two acts is like pretty different though, to be honest. Um,
It is very similar in some ways as well.
it is yes. So it's just so what more needs to be said? Honestly, this is horrific. This is barbaric. And as a side note, I mean, every time we talk about these blasphemy lynchings that are happening, like I make this point, but I think it is now more obvious than ever is because I used to get like really, really, really pissed when people are like, oh, well, this isn't actually Islamic because this is not deemed as okay by Islamic scriptures or, all the excuses that people give to say that this isn't Islamic partially because, in Sharia law, this is not the proper way to deal with a blasphemer, for example. But I don't know how people can like say that with a straight face when there's literally mosque loudspeakers like announcing and inciting people like to a mob. Like whether or not this is Islamic in a traditional scriptural legalistic sense, whatever. But clearly this is endorsed by a large amount of the community or community leaders if we're getting announcements and incitements from the literal houses of worship itself. Like, I don't know how deluded you expect the rest of us to be. Um, well, I really so this made me go want to look into the psychology of lynching in general, which I do want to talk about a little bit. But before I go off on like a huge ramp and data dump, Armin, I want to like just get your reaction before I take it away. If you have anything to share.
No, by the way, I know a lot of people on our channel have been desensitized from crap like this happening in Pakistan. Um, I just want people to understand that even though this seems repetitive, uh, it's actually escalating. Like it is repetitive, but it's also getting worse. Like it's not like the same as before. So
Empirically, we can
it might
track
look
that.
like the same as before because we have lynching in Pakistan, but you have to understand that it is escalating. It's not like, oh, this is normal for Pakistan. No, this is, I mean, it's normal to lynch people for blasphemy in Pakistan, but the level is not normal. The level is escalating. This is not even normal for Pakistan. And I mean, we used to get news like this that even the police is like afraid of these mob, but now we're getting them more often. That the police, like people, it used to be a very rare thing for people to attack the cops, but now it's like, oh yeah, the police can't do anything. Like the police are like, oh, you want to come kill this person? Well, we want to live, so have at it. And even if the police is armed, but the mob is just so many, and if the police wants to defend itself, then they will surely like be hunted down because they defended the blasphemer. Imagine that. Like, even if you succeed that day, you basically ended your life. If you want to defend, like you saw, we had a politician that came out and said something about protecting somebody that was accused of blasphemy, and his own bodyguard killed him. So the police, if they coming for a blasphemer, and they were like, we stop, if they want to stop the mob, they will be known, they will be marked as people who protected the blasphemer. So that's why if the mob is coming at the police station, they're like, the police is like, well, I'm not getting paid enough to risk my life to protect a blasphemer. So it's just like, okay, mob, do what you will. So we're getting to the point where it's becoming the law. The rule of law means nothing when it comes to blasphemy in Pakistan.
Yeah.
So yeah, and also, by the way, somebody was asking in the live chat, isn't it Islamically, aren't you supposed to, if somebody's accused of blasphemy, aren't you supposed to like not do vigilante justice and have like a course and a qazi and a shura or whatever, like a judge, Islamic judge, and coming out and checking the blasphemy case? Like, aren't these Muslims being not Islamic by taking the law into their own hand? Like, aren't they doesn't Islam teaches you that if you want to kill a blasphemer, there needs to be a procedure, that there needs to be a process. There needs the accused needs to be able to defend itself. Well, if I would imagine that if somebody wants to argue Islamically for the mob's side, what they could argue, again, I'm not endorsing this, I'm just showing you that Islam leaves your hands open to justify mob justice, is that Pakistan is actually not enforcing Islamic law, because no blasphemers have been executed by the government, right? So as a radical as a radical meaning true Muslim Pakistani, I might be like, yeah, I would let the Islamic government do the thing that it's supposed to do. But where is the Islamic government? Sharia is not actually being enforced. Not a single person that has been accused of blasphemy has been executed by the government. So Islamic law is not being enforced, and because we don't, that's why it makes sense for us. So this is like part of Darul Harb right now. Like I could. This is my duty is to enforce Sharia, given that there is no state that is enforcing Sharia. Because enforcing Sharia means you're supposed to execute blasphemers. So that might be the argument that these people might have to take the law into their hand. So again, and you could argue, like some people, some scholars might be like, okay, that makes sense, that's justified. Some scholars might be like, no, that's not justified. The point is that it leaves the door open for that interpretation. Like Islam, when you're does give you that excuse to be able to say that these acts are Islamic. Yeah.
No, Armin, what you just said is like very, very prescient because what I was researching before this news segment was I went back and I was rewatching some videos I've seen in the past that are doing case studies of lynchings that occurred in the Jim Crow era of the United States, primarily against black men, right? In the South. And what it revealed to me was that one of the things that was a very what people need to understand is that the people that commit these lynchings are normal people. So we think of this as a monstrous act, right? And it is. But we need to understand that from a societal level, these are normal people. Like, this is your barber, this is your fruit seller. But there are conditions and pre-existing factors within the society that allow the normal people to do these monstrous acts in a mob setting and then still go
Hmm.
back to their ordinary lives as normal people, you know? Because no one thinks of
Yes.
themselves as the monster. And one of these preconditions is that, so and when doing a comparison of lynchings in the American South to this is not a one-to-one comparison, because there's like a very highly visible racial component to what informed the actions in the American South that aren't really fully able to be transposed onto Pakistan, right? But one of the preconditions is a sense that they are actually carrying out justice because the law of the land will not carry out the justice as they deem appropriate. So, for example, if a black man is going to be lynched in the American South after the Civil War for a perceived, I don't know, sexual impropriety towards a white woman, The mob feels it necessary to kill that man because in the court of law, he would only get 2 years in prison, and that's seen as completely unjust. That's seen as not right. That's seen as not an appropriate punishment. So when the entire Pakistani community knows that, okay, although we have this as a death sentence on the books of the law of the land, we know that our actual justice system is not going to deliver justice. Therefore, the law rendering it a death penalty legitimizes that concept, legitimizes that this is worthy of death, but everyone knows that it's not actually going to be carried out. Therefore, they are not going to be receiving the sense of justice that they feel is required and necessary. So they have to take it upon themselves to enact the justice that they feel is necessary. Like this is a very important prerequisite. One other thing that I think is very important to understand is that you can track, especially in the American South back in the day, the frequency and rate of lynchings according to socioeconomic hardship. So basically, the more poor and impoverished, and the more that people have to compete for resources in an environment, is a prerequisite for higher rates of blasphemy lynchings.
Mm.
It doesn't take a very difficult examination of Pakistan to understand, you know, the level of material impoverishment that many people are living with, right?
Yeah.
Now
It's
to
three
be clear,
factors.
yeah, to be clear, I have not examined, the rate of different blasphemy lynchings in different provinces and how that tracks with GDP. That'd be a very interesting project. I haven't done that. But as a general concept, right? The other thing is that what people don't understand, and this is going to sound very, very dark, but this is an element of human psychology, is that these kind of actions are actually communal bonding events.
Mm.
This is a way for a community to bond together.
Holy
Bec-
crap. You're right.
It is. It is. And because it's a way for a community to expunge the impurity from itself. It's also a way for an impoverished, frustrated community to release its rage and anger upon the difficulty of their life, frankly, and the difficulty of their circumstances. And so it's also bonding in the sense that it um is very affirming from a individual psychological level, because when you're doing this you're saying I have honor and I identify what is good and what is bad, and
Virtue signaling.
my in group is good, and
Mm.
I am enacting my supremacy over what is bad by destroying it. In the antebellum South, that was clearly just open, indiscriminate, tyrannical, terroristic white supremacy. And the point of the white supremacy at that time was literally to terrorize the newly freed black population into submission. It had a utility, right? This also has a utility. This is a utility of Islamist supremacy, of Muslim supremacy, because this is often enacted upon religious minorities. It's a supremacy against the blasphemer. It's also a way for people to feel like they are righting a wrong. And especially when you're informed and socialized with various notions of honor and shame, and the shame and disgust towards a perceived desecration or blasphemy, like it feels very validating to cleanse that. And when in a mob setting, people are empowered to do things that they would never do as individuals. It gives people a sense of being anonymized. It gives people a sense of being part of something greater than themselves, which is one of the most powerful feelings and psychological needs we have as humans. It gives people a sense of being part of the in group, which has very, 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 very important psychologically protective factors. Because when I was studying for my psychology degree, I took this class on advanced research methods of moral development. And we looked essentially at how various factors of our human psychology, starting before we can even speak in infancy, can lead us down the path of in-group bias. One form of in-group bias, for example, is racism. And what people don't like to talk about is that this form of in-group bias, sometimes personified as racism, actually has positive benefits for the individual. That doesn't mean that it's right. That doesn't mean that it's okay. But what I'm saying is that there are observable
It's
phenomena.
utility.
Yeah, there's a psychological
Utility.
utility to it, and it can be observed and measured, right? That doesn't make it
Okay.
okay, but people need to understand that these don't exist for no reason. These
Right.
biases
By the
exist
way,
because they have a
we have
utility.
to be careful because YouTube might not be able to tell the difference between explaining something and excusing something. So I just want to cut you for half a second here and explain to people that Susanna is explaining what's happening. And explanations sometimes for people who are not paying attention might come off as a justification, and that's not what's happening here. Okay, just for people who are not following. But go on, yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I wanted to have that little diversion of topic so that people understand like some of the factors that play into acts like this. Yeah, disclaimer. um and it and I think it's also important because we need to understand the factors that can give rise to acts like this, because this is very foreign for many people. But at the same time, I want people to understand that under the right circumstances, this could happen in your community too. Like, believe it or not. Maybe not because of a form of lynching or an accusation of blasphemy. You know what I mean? But if your society was in the right kind of preconditions, stuff like this can happen. And it's very, very sick. It is very, very sick. But then the people who enact this torture of a man in the middle of a public road will go back to their normal life, and they'll go back to being the banker or the shop owner.
Yeah.
They
Like
don't
nothing
live
happened.
their life as a monster.
Yeah.
So I hope people are okay with my little psychology diversion. I'm just too much of a
No, that was good. That was good.
I'm just too much of a psych nerd.
We have some people commenting on this in the live chat. So you start some of them. Do you want
Yeah,
to?
let's go through this. Um Muhammad, oh, Shami, hi, Shami, is saying, Pakistan, you never fail to disappoint, nor will you ever grow when extremist hate preachers such as the TLP have become mainstream, capital of blasphemy, murders, and cousin shagging. I'm so, so proud. Yeah, well, Shami, I'm glad that you are not in Pakistan because you don't have to deal with this. And the mainstreaming of the TLP and their Islamist project like is a huge portion of this, although they are hardly the only people involved in an Islamist project of Pakistan. Let's be clear. Um, I talk no talk sense no BC please is saying, hey guys, did you see the public flogging of a Muslim woman in West Bengal and India by crazy Muslim goons? I haven't heard of this, but I'm actually interested in covering this. So in the description of this video, we have a link to our Discord, and you can give us new suggestions on Discord if you join our Discord and then go to the channel called News Suggestions or News Recommendations. And please post a link to an article covering this there, because I would actually be interested in covering a story like this. So if you can provide me a source, we might cover it next week. Um, and young atheist who is in Pakistan is saying, I went to Swat many times for tour, and now I am scared to even leave my city because people in Pakistan can blame you for blasphemy for anything. And this is the nature of the problem, is that it is openly known that these blasphemy allegations are often just utilized to settle personal scores. And
Mm.
you'll have hundreds of people after you before you can even say jump, because of, I don't know,
So
maybe you had a beef with someone over paying back some money or something.
then the problem is that sometimes it's not even, yes, sometimes you're right. Sometimes it's settling scores. But sometimes if somebody accuses you of blasphemy, even by mistake or just randomly, then the other people denying it could be dangerous, could be seen as protecting a blasphemer. So it's just like a spark. Somebody like, oh, did this person do blasphemy? Well, which side? Now I'm the second person. I'm like, well, I'm not going to say no, because if the rest of the crowd all of a sudden decides that yes, it did, I'm going to be on the record for defending a blasphemer. So if I want to be safe, I would be like, oh yeah, he did, let's get him. So on the next person, like, I don't want to be defending a blasphemer. Okay, yeah, he did, let's get him. So just the smallest amount of accusation could just go viral, and everybody would like take the safe side of assuming that this guy did do blasphemy, even if he did it. So that's how it's just all of a sudden goes. That's why it's so dangerous, because you might be even somebody like, well, I don't owe anybody any money. I don't have any enemies, so I'm safe, right? Nobody is going to just randomly accuse me of blasphemy. But apparently, no, because this guy was traveling. This guy was in a place that people didn't even know him. He didn't have any enemies there. He was just randomly accused of blasphemy, and now he's dead in the most brutal, disgusting way possible.
Um so Gasian American was asking about the socioeconomic factors. I think I already touched on that. De- Depressed socioeconomic situation is a highly correlated with these kinds of things. Um, Based on historic studies of these kinds of incidents. Um, for example, in the American South, you can literally track like the power of the cotton industry to the rise and fall of lynchings. Um, Mukti Pratit is saying, "Can anything fix Pakistan?" Armin, I think you start this.
Yeah, well, I mean, so there's three factors here that is making Pakistan the way it is right now. Number one is Islam. Number two is poverty. Number three is inbreeding, right? These are the main factors why Pakistan is being like this, and they're both very effective. And they both work. I mean, all three of them are very effective, and all three of them work together. Like sometimes Islam is very helpful for events like this, but sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes you need Islam and poverty. Sometimes Islam is enough, and poverty is often not enough. You need poverty and Islam, but Islam and poverty together by themselves are really good for increasing these types of events. But Pakistan, just to make sure that it's not they just added a third element, which is we're not just like, this is not just like a, the inbreeding part is a main impact. I think a lot of people just think like when we're mentioning inbreeding in Pakistan, we're just trying to like insult or be like edgy. This is actually a scientific. This has actually been studied. Like this is a huge problem in Pakistan. This is not like us trying to be edgy or being insulting or anything like that. This is actually scientific. Go look at studies and reports. This is a major reason for why Pakistan is going down the way it is. So, can we fix Pakistan? Well, the poverty part doesn't seem to be. I don't like the well. Can you remove Islam from Pakistan? Here's the thing: is Pakistan doesn't have much going for it when it comes to cultures and ideologies other than Pakistan, because usually in a society when it's becoming de-Islamized, like for example in Iran, it's because there's some alternatives, like there's something to replace that with. But Pakistan doesn't have much of an alternative. So it's really hard to de-Islamize Pakistan. When it comes to poverty, that is insanely difficult. But and also these radical events makes investment in Pakistan much you know much more risky. This is basically the best way to advertise do not to all investors around the world to your money is not welcome here. So so when I say Islam and poverty, it's not, the poverty is not separate from the Islam. The Islam actually brings the poverty, and the poverty brings the Islam, so it's like a vicious cycle. And the inbreeding is also not separate from the other ones. The inbreeding is also because of Islam. It's all related. Actually, you know what? The problem is Islam, 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 because the poverty and inbreeding also comes from Islam. Actually, never mind. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not. I don't want to say there. Nothing can fix. Nothing that we can think of can fix Pakistan. But I have to say, I don't think anything can fix Pakistan. I don't want to say it because it just seems like very um pessimistic, and we're talking about a very populated country with a lot of people. So it's good, like there's utility in having hope so that there's something people do about it. And being so pessimistic might discourage people to do anything about it. But I'm just struggling, like if anybody can find, like, I don't know, I don't see any light at the end of this tunnel. I mean, if you're saying one, please share it with us so that we're not this pessimistic about Pakistan. I would be happy to be educated about some form of hope or anything. But I'm not seeing it. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm just saying that I'm not seeing it. I'm happy to be corrected. But do you see anything that could be a little bit more hopeful for Pakistan? No? Okay. The
I have a lot of
silence.
friends in Pakistan that I really like and care about.
That makes it sadder because
Yeah.
now that we have that, yeah, okay. Muhammad is saying, makes me sad, but I completely agree with what you said. And also, by the way, I'm glad Muhammad was mentioning the TLP, because it's the
Mhm.
fourth problem is that all of this is now being taking political form with a huge political might behind it. So it's not just that these problems that I mentioned are all organic, but because the TLP is there, things are getting worse, because it's going from a virus that is spreading organically in society to a systematic design behind it, which makes it a lot more forceful and a lot more guided, which makes it a lot harder to deal with. So the TLP. So yeah, add the fact that we have the TLP on top of this, to make this disease and this virus into a weapon that is being purposefully used in a direction, and that makes it all even worse.
Yeah. Um okay, so we have an thank you for touching on the TLP. I think that's very important. I didn't really get into it in this segment because, like, we've rehashed the TLP and their involvement and their incitement and their history many times when we've talked about these blasphemy lynchings before. If anyone's curious about learning more about that, you can go look on our channel for other blasphemy lynchings we've covered in Pakistan, because I've probably went on a rant about that before. Um, and yeah, I just didn't want to rehash it all over again. Gasian American gave a super chat. Thank you, Gasian. Saying this is touching about a famous lynching in America for people who are not familiar. Saying the lynchers of Emmett Till were exonerated by a jury and America doesn't allow jeopardy. I can tell why Greece did ostracisms and people did goat sacrifices. Yeah, I mean, this is another issue that plays into the growing prevalence of lynchings in Pakistan today, is the amount of leniency that the perpetrators are allowed. It's like kind of a form of tacit compliance in by the authorities. And it allows these acts to continue and to continue at a higher rate. When I was studying for the show, I actually found a study that was released very recently, I think by a think tank in Pakistan, actually examining the rate of blasphemy accusations since the foundation of Pakistan. And I didn't have a chance to read through it in length, but I really, really want to so I can come to you guys with better information. And what was so interesting was that beginning in 2011 is when we begin to see a huge spike in blasphemy accusations and blasphemy killings. And then an even bigger spike beginning in 2020. And that's very interesting to think about. And I'd be very curious to see to what extent what we see post 2020 is correlated with the COVID pandemic and any um, socioeconomic deprivation that followed. Um, so that's something that I really want to investigate and then come back to you guys with.
Do you know who makes the most amazing, gorgeous, and other adjectives that I can't use here on YouTube, blasphemous art ever? We do! And for some reason, we are giving it away for free. Download them now using the link in the description before we change our mind.